Welcome to the 46th reading of my memoir, The Innocence of Guilt. The Art of Two-Timing. Autumn arrived. I'd been unwell, and Mum put me in her bed so she could keep an eye on me. Voices at the front door, then footsteps coming up the stairs. Who should walk into the room but Patrick? An hallucination, surely, but he spoke and jolted me into reality. He'd heard about my sickness, no mention of who told him, and so he thought he'd come to see me. Too overcome with emotion to say anything, my heart leapt at the sight of him. So long since I'd seen him up close. The pain of losing him so familiar, I'd learnt to accept it, like a festering wound that never closes but doesn't kill you. I let him tell me little bits and pieces of what he'd been doing, and gradually let him draw me back into his world, as if I'd never been tossed out of it, never had my heart crushed, never felt my whole world fall apart, never wanted to die because of what he did to me. Before he left, he leant across the bed and kissed me lightly on my forehead. "I'll come and see you again," he whispered, and I lay there, intoxicated with the memory of his touch. He did more than visit me. He took me back, and I took up residence once more in the land of the living. Even working at the factory filled my days with peace because love filled my life again. When we went to the pictures or sat in my front room playing records, Patrick acted as if I was all he wanted, but he still only saw me once a week. Soon tired of spending time alone, but invigorated by having Patrick back, I enrolled in an English course at the newly opened Technical Institute on Sheepen Road in order to acquire the second half of the RSA exam. In the classroom with other adults facing the blackboard, surrounded by books, pens and papers, I became reunited with the girl I used to be in school. Perhaps if I worked hard at my English, I could manage to get a more interesting job. One night Patrick took it in his head to invite me out and was upset that I had something else already planned. When I told him what it was, he became sarcastic. "What do you want to do that for?" he blurted out. "You're not at school anymore. You don't need to go to English classes." So afraid he'd leave me, I stopped attending them. I thought he would want to spend more time with me as a result of my decision, but he didn't. I had thrown away my interest and the chance of a better future for nothing. So I was back where I started, with him and yet strangely not with him. The only way I managed to see him, other than our once-a-week date, was to step outside my house during dinner time and catch him walking around the corner with a workmate. He acknowledged my presence, but barely. Once again, the factory management moved me to a different section. The idea behind moving me around the factory was not to educate me, but it ended up having that effect. I applied this skill to making my own clothes. We still didn't have a sewing machine at home, but that didn't deter me, as I could sew anything by hand. Mum liked me to turn her Polly Long frocks, as she comically called them, up to a more fashionable length. One of the girls in my new section described herself as a born-again Christian, and she was out to convert every single one of us to her blissful state. I thought she had a personal mission where I was concerned, and perhaps she did. She invited me to sing in the choir at a Youth for Christ rally held in the Moot Hall. These rallies were offshoots of the Billy Graham crusades that took Britain by storm in the 1950s. I told her I didn't believe what she believed in, but she said it didn't matter. No strings attached. At the practices, I experienced the joy of singing in a big choir for the first time in my life. Up on the stage during the service, I sang Cleansing Blood and Saving Grace without having a clue what the words meant. I didn't get saved, but it did become a prelude of sorts to what happened next. Most teenagers then and now usually don't look to their mothers for improving their social life, but although I typically didn't give mine any credit for helping me at the time, I realized afterwards the crucial part she played. Tired of hearing my constant complaints of boredom, she told me of a special autumn kickoff for the youth group operating out of her church, a tramp supper. You dressed up in old ragged clothes and sat down on the floor to eat. Mum's friends said the young people would make me feel welcome. It sounded stupid to me, but I decided to give it a try. On the Saturday in question, I walked to Eld Lane wearing ordinary jeans and a jumper, as a tramp wasn't a character role I was particularly interested in. Once inside the church building, after pacing up and down several times in trepidation, I felt at ease, so unlike me. The other young people welcomed me warmly, and before I knew it, I sat on the floor in a big human circle, tucking into a delicious meal of sausages and baked beans. As the evening progressed, we played games, finishing off with ballroom dancing, which I'd learnt at school. I recognized two boys, identical twins. One twin, Barry, danced with me, but if he remembered me from Wilson Marriage School, he didn't let on. He'd attended there for 2 years before joining his brother at the grammar school. I had a slight crush on him for a short time, but I don't believe he knew about it. Mum persuaded me to attend Sunday morning church services with her. Singing the old familiar hymns pleasantly reminded me of school assembly. I told Patrick I went to church with my mother, and he didn't oppose it. What possible trouble could I get into attending church services? He invited me to go with him and his parents to his aunt and uncle's house for Christmas. This invite thrilled me. I would be accepted into the family at last and taken seriously as his girlfriend. I hoped he would ask me to marry him. Then I would have him beside me forever. Mum seemed hurt that I wanted to spend Christmas with Patrick's family, but she didn't press me unduly to stay at home. She knew better than to try that tactic on me. For my part, as excited as I was, I felt torn between my allegiance to my family and my desire to be with the person I loved with all my heart. Last year, I hadn't been with my family emotionally, and this year I would be absent in body. Betrayal. I thought of Mum's cooking and baking, chocolates to pass around, nuts to crack, chestnuts to roast over the embers of the coal fire, beer for Dad and Din-Din, Stone's ginger wine, Mum's favourite, and lime cordial for David and me. Carols on the wireless, the Queen's speech, and all the fighting and bickering laid aside for a short, precious time. In spite of the conflict in my heart, I chose to accept Patrick's invite. The holiday didn't live up to my hopes. My sense of aloneness at odds with the camaraderie of his large family. After Christmas, he cooled off again, and I feared I'd failed some important test. In January of 1960, 2 young girls from church approached me after the Sunday service. They invited me to join them up in the balcony instead of sitting with my mother and the older ladies downstairs. They also invited me back to the youth group, and I decided to give it a try. Waiting for my life to start in earnest with Patrick had begun to grate on me. The first time I walked into the youth group, I was noticed. My longer hair fell in bouncy red highlighted waves around my shoulders. I wore a tight short skirt and winkle-picker high-heeled shoes which showed off one of my best features, my legs. They weren't long as legs go, but they were shapely. I'd barely walked into the room before a tall, dark-haired, brown-eyed boy made a beeline over to me, introduced himself as Ben, and promptly claimed me. Easily the best-looking boy there that night, the twins weren't around, so I made no protest. At the back of my mind, I thought I should say I already have a boyfriend, but that thought flew out fast when he took me upstairs to the games room, which housed a ping-pong and snooker table, darts board, and piano. The piano did me in, or perhaps I ought to say his playing of it. He played For Elise by Beethoven for me, and I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. Whether without the piano music he would have succeeded in seducing me, I cannot say, but it played a huge part in the spell he managed to weave. From that moment on, we were an item, and every member of the youth group knew it. Ben was only 15, 2 years younger than me, and attended the Royal Grammar School. I wasn't concerned about our age difference, although initially he appeared to be. We sat and discussed poetry and music, and he seemed so mature that I didn't see the age gap as a problem and told him not to worry. I floated on cloud 9, and things like that didn't matter much on such a weightless plane of existence. Every Saturday night I saw him at youth group, and on Sunday mornings at church services. During the week he wrote me letters, so I felt wonderfully cherished, but I still dated Patrick, who didn't suspect a thing. Neither did Ben, but I suffered more guilt about Patrick as I'd been with him longer. My problem was that I wanted both of them. I considered them two separate halves of the ideal boy. Long used to a fractured existence within my own mind, it didn't seem unreasonable to me. Ben attracted me because of his exuberance, intelligence, and fun-loving attitude. With him, a new world waited to embrace me, a world much more fun than the one I shared with Patrick. When I told Patrick about Ben, I kept my tone casual, implying that I knew him as a friend, but as time went by, he began to question the relationship. He asked me outright if we were more than friends, and I admitted to letting Ben kiss me. Patrick responded in anger. "Why don't you leave then? It's what you want to do anyway." I didn't deny it, but did something I never imagined I would do. Without saying a word, I stood up and calmly walked out of his house, out of his life. On reaching home, I entered the front room and momentarily panicked. The room instantly reminded me of him. He stood in this very space. He sat in this very chair. He touched this very table. He'll never be here again because I've left him. Then I thought it over. Patrick had never said he loved me, not once, whereas Ben said it all the time. I must have made the right choice. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to subscribe, like, or comment on this reading, and hopefully you will tune in to the next one. Bye for now.